Hi, my name is Greg Newman, and I am the founder of the Molly Mo Foundation. This is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to helping change the stigma of addiction and alcoholism and to really affect a change in the way we approach um, this problem. See, I don't know if people realize, but 13% of our population become addicts and alcoholics. That's one in eight. So that means that, when Billy passes somebody a joint when they're 14 years old or a beer, that means that seven out of eight of us take a sip, maybe two. That's kind of cool, set it down. But one out of eight of us, we trigger the allergy. We trigger the disease of addiction and we pursue it to the inevitable bitter ends, which is jails, institutions, and death. And it starts with some behavioral patterns. There'll be some red flags, somebody get in trouble and then they won't stop, right? That's what happened to me. I remember a guy named Ben was like, "Oh, Newman, busted, oops, busted, oops," because I kept getting in trouble and I kept on doing the stuff, right? And, at 16 years old, I wasn't trying to hear that I was an addict, right? I didn't want to think that all my friends could get high and I couldn't, you know, uh, that was ridiculous to me. And so I didn't know that there was any other kind of way, and I didn't know there was a solution, and I didn't think that I could live life and be happy if I couldn't get high because I thought that's just what people did, right? They didn't do it like I did, right? They didn't become drug dealers, right? They didn't go to prison and then get out and then go back to prison. They didn't lose their families, right? They didn't lose their significant others and then continue to use, right? I mean, that's my story in a nutshell. Uh, I mean, it's crazy. I spent 30 years pursuing the idea that I could use successfully like normal people. But I'm not. My brain's wired differently, right? And I like to use this example, right? A potato does not choose to be a french fry any more than it chooses to become vodka, right? Just like a person does not choose to become an addict or an alcoholic. That's just what happens. And it's not because of a lack of willpower, it's not because of a moral failing, it's because we've triggered something in our brains that makes us obsess over it. It's a mental obsession. It's a physical allergy, right? It's a disease, and people don't look at it like that, right? And so, what my idea is, see, I lost the love of my life, Molly Johnson, Molly Mo, right? And it was recent, and in order to honor her memory, and to she was estranged from her family for 6 years, from her son, even. She wasn't allowed to see her son unless she got a year clean. And that is a long time for an addict or an alcoholic. That's a long time for somebody that just drinks regularly, just to not drink for a year. But imagine if you have this mental obsession and you just constantly think about it because you don't have any other way to deal with that, right? You don't know how to not obsess over it, right? Well, there's 12-step programs, and those are past the spirituality. And if you substitute the word alcohol or addiction, you put any word in there that is an issue in your life: sex, shopping, eating, right? Anything that's causing spending too much money, anything that's causing you an issue, you can use the 12 steps and you can figure out how to not do these things that are problems for you, right? 12 steps is a path to spirituality. It's a really great program. But here's the thing. I mean, I went to those rooms for, let's see, I was 16 when I first had to start going to the meetings, and I would go in and I would turn in my meeting sheet to get signed, and I get a cup of coffee, and then I would leave. I'd go out and smoke cigarettes, and then I come back in, maybe get a refill on my coffee, go back out, smoke some more cigarettes, and then when I saw people start coming out, I go in and pick up my meeting sheet. I did that once a week, and I turned it into probation. Right? That's what I did. I never listened to anything. I I heard keep coming back. That's it. Right? Glad you're here. Whatever stuff like that. And I didn't care. Right? I didn't want to be there. I was just that was an hour of my week that I couldn't get back as far as I was concerned. And I didn't give it a chance. I didn't know what a sponsor was. I didn't know what the literature said. I mean, I would read in the book, I would look in the back and I read the stories, right? And I would say, well, I guess that kind of is like me, but I'm not as bad as those guys. You know what I mean? I haven't lost everything. And, I mean, thanks for the information, but no thanks, right? That's what I said. And I was going to pursue My idea of being able to, you know, get high like a gentleman, right? And it started out with weed, right? And then I ended up being a heroin addict. And I mean, I've almost died, and that's how Molly died, right? And I mean, it's crazy because she came from a good family, just like I did. I came from a nice town with, you know, small schools, really good school. You know, she went to really good schools. She had a great family, right? She had a great upbringing. She was a championship swimmer. You know, she was the lead in Annie in her high school musical. I mean, she was a superstar. And I didn't even know this stuff because I didn't pry because I knew that family was a sore subject, right? I learned a lot of stuff about her after she passed away. But I mean, she was a beautiful soul, but she was tortured, right? Because of the drugs, because she couldn't stop using them, and she couldn't be with her family. She asked not to have a funeral because she didn't want a bunch of drug addicts coming to the funeral and embarrassing her family, right? And she wanted to be cremated so that she could be with her family without the madness, right? To be with the people that loved her without the madness. And at first I didn't understand, and it was rough for me because I didn't get to see her after she passed. I never got to see her again. Luckily, they let me come to the celebration of life, and I went and I got some closure out of that. But it was really hard. It was really hard. I mean, that was the love of my life. I loved her more than I loved anybody ever in my life, and it was really difficult. But some good has come of it because I'm doing this, right? So, you know, I finally got some help, and it took 2 months after she passed. That's how hardcore this disease is, right? It made me lose just about everything. I mean, I had to lose my truck in the wintertime, which I was living in because I was an addict and spending all my money on drugs. I was living in my truck, and when my truck got stolen, it was either sleep outside in December and probably freeze to death and die a horrible, painful death, or go get some help and go into detox. And I was so sad without Molly. Like, I wanted to go to detox just long enough to get clean enough so I could get out of detox and die because I couldn't die because my tolerance was so high on the drugs that killed her, right? That was my plan. But then, luckily, I had some clarity in detox, and I was able to get off the drugs, and it was so hard. It was really hard, and it was a lot harder now because the drugs are just stronger. The fentanyl is not the same as the heroin, and that's what everybody's selling now, and it's killing people, right? And Molly, from what I understand, the last conversation she had with her mom said that you'll never amount to nothing if you don't get off drugs. And Molly, feeling dejected, said, "Well, why don't I just kill myself then?" And her mom said, "Don't talk about it, be about it." And that was the last conversation she had with her mom. And I know that that probably eats at her mother. And I don't know that that's true. That's what one of her friends told me, right? I mean, but Molly wanted to be around her family, but she didn't want to be around her family in the way that she was because she knew that they would be disappointed and that they didn't understand why she couldn't stop. I mean, she tried. She went to rehab. She went to different places, but she just never could get into that groove and get into recovery the way she needed to and make it stick. And I don't know why it didn't work for Molly. I don't know why, because we never tried the recovery thing together. We were in active addiction together. We were insane together, right? Now, here's the thing. I know that this started with Molly in high school, just like it started with me. And it starts with some people even younger than that, right? Um, I watched this movie while I was in detox. It was called Anonymous People. And they were talking about sober schools and the need for them, right? And, since that movie came out, it was in 2012, there's been a lot of, forward mobility in recovery, right? There's been insurances letting you go to rehab now, right? They're paying for it, whereas before they were saying that that was something that was not included, right? You go to the hospital with diabetes, and they give you insulin, and they try to help you for the rest of your life. You go with cancer, right? They do everything they can to try to help you, right? And they put you on a path to recovery, and they follow up with you, and they do everything they can to try to cure you from this or put you in remission. And then they follow up with you when you're in remission because it may come back, right? And become malignant again. So, I mean, my parents both died of cancer. I know how that stuff goes. I mean, my dad was in remission for 5 years, right? And my mom, I mean, they worked on her, but she was in stage 4 when they found her, right? She was, it was all they could do was make her comfortable. But that's how they do it when you have a disease that society looks at as a disease, right? But when society looks at it as a moral failing, They put you in detox and kick you out in 3 to 5 days and say good luck, right? And then you're lucky if you can get a bed in rehab. And you have to do the work yourself. And I get it. If you get diabetes, you have to give yourself the insulin. And so if you're an addict, you have to give yourself the meetings. A rehab is a $10,000 big book, right? You go to rehab and you learn about recovery and you learn about AA and NA and the different A's and NEA to save your A, right? And then it's on you to do it, right? But they teach you a lot of statistics and they teach you a lot of coping mechanisms, right? And they teach you about the way you're thinking, right? It's kind of a cognitive behavioral therapy type of thing in a lot of ways, right? But, the program, NA and AA, is not like that, right? It's a 12-step program where you have to do the work and you have to dig in, you have to get inside and figure out, because here's the thing, is that, the drugs and alcohol, that was the solution. It wasn't the problem, right? I mean, there are things eating my lunch that cause me to do the things that I do, right? And if I can't get to the bottom of that and figure it out and figure out the patterns that I'm doing in my life and then figure out what my character defects are, right? And try to work on those and be aware of those. And if I can't, figure out, who I've harmed in my addiction and go and try to make amends. And that's not saying sorry, right? Saying sorry is not an amends. An amends is saying, hey, I did you wrong. And it doesn't matter if you did me wrong because I'm cleaning up my side of the street. I did you wrong. What does it take? What do you require of me to make it right? And that's an amends, right? And then you've got your maintenance steps, and it's a spiritual thing, and you help others. And it's real simple when you break it down. Dr. Bob, he was one of the two founders, Bill W. and Dr. Bob of AA. He wrote a prescription. He said, trust God, clean house, and help others. And that's the program, right? It's just a little bit more detail when you get into it. They tell you more how to do it, right? But anyway, so in that, Anonymous People is talking about sober schools, okay, and the need for them, and it's a huge need in our society. And there's this comedian, Kristen Johnston. She was from Third Rock from the Sun, the tall blonde. She is in recovery, and she wrote a book called Guts. And then she was trying to get a sober school chartered in New York, and they had agreed to 600 schools that year, and they said no to a sober school. And she was being vocal about it, and that's kind of crazy, right? And I think she was trying to do like a public school and get the government to pay for it, so maybe that's partly why, right? So my idea is a little bit different. And also, they've got something in Indianapolis called the Hope Academy, and it's through Fairbanks. But the thing about it is I've been around those kids because I've been to meetings and met them, and they're cool kids, right? But they're also the kids who got kicked out of high school, right? They're the kids that, other kids look at as like degenerates and like, fuck ups, for lack of a better term. And that sucks, right? Because now that's the camaraderie that they have in there, and there's not very many kids in there. Because those are the kids that got expelled and kicked out because they were just problem childs that could not get their stuff together enough, could not nip it in the bud, right? So what I'm thinking is we need to change the stigma anyway, right? It's not bad kids. It's 1 in 8 kids. You're not a bad kid because when somebody passed you a joint, you couldn't control yourself because your brain is wired a little bit differently. That doesn't make you bad. I've got 2 brothers and a sister, right? They smoked pot. They drank, right? They still do, but they can put it down, and it's not a problem for them. But with me, it is. Like, I pursue it to the bitter ends, jails, institutions, and death, right? That's what happens when I pick up. That's not what happens when they pick up. Same family, same genes, right? So 1 out of 4 of us, that happened to. Statistically, it's 1 in 8. So that means if 2 families just like mine, 2 4-kid families, right? I was the one out of the 8 kids in those families that was going to be the addict. And I can even compare that to some kids I went to school with, the Hornings right down the road. None of them have addiction issues, right? But I did. Why me? Because I'm the potato that became the vodka. It's just that simple. So, anyway, we need, in our society, we need a safe space from the first red flag till death do us part. Because that's the answer. Okay, look, let's look at some scientific experiments, right? They did experiments on mice, and they put mice, like 1 mouse, maybe 2, in a cage, just the 2 of them, or just the 1 of them, and they put some regular water, and then they put some water laced with heroin, and then they put some water laced with cocaine. and then they may put some kind of a pedal or something they could, tap. Smoker's cough, sorry, that they could tap to get whatever water they wanted. And when they were in there, just the two of them with nothing else except for the water, every single time they went for the heroin and the cocaine, right? It's just what they did. They didn't even drink any of the other water, and they did it all the way till they died, right? Now, and that was the original experiments on addiction, and it seemed everything was hopeless, right? Like, if that's available, they're just going to die. But look at their situations. They were just in a cage by themselves with nothing except the drugs, right? No stimulation, right? No socialization, right? No companionship. I don't know if there was two in the cage or one. I don't know that much about it, right? I'm not going to lie. I haven't sat here and read the study right before I got on here. I just bringing up stuff that I know from my, learning. Anyway, they did another study. Somebody else thought, let's change this up a little bit. You remember in the Green Mile when they were talking about like Mousy Land or something? The guy that was they were gonna kill him, the big dude, they were gonna kill him or whatever, and he was talking about Mousy Land, like a Mouse City or whatever. Well, they did something like that. They made like a Disneyland or something type of deal for these mice, and they put all kinds of cool stuff that they could play with, right? Tunnels and ride whatever, activities, right? And they put a bunch of mice in there, so it was a community, right? So there was families of mice and just a bunch of different mice socializing and living a normal life. They was just in a bigger cage with stuff to do. And then they put the same water in there. They put regular water, they put heroin water, and they put cocaine water. Once in a while, a mouse would go take some cocaine or some heroin. But rarely. Most of the time, they took the regular water because they were happy and they were in a community, right? And, here's the thing, though. With humans, once we've triggered that allergy, that heroin and that cocaine can't be there. When that's there in our faces, right, and other people are using it in front of us, it's really hard for us to not want to use. Even if we're working a program, when you put that in our faces, it's difficult, right? Now, we can get to a point where we can be around that, but why put yourself in that position? Why do it? That is just, it's like they say if you go to the barbershop enough times, you're going to get your hair cut, right? And you go to the trap house, eventually you're going to smoke some crack or you're going to do some heroin. And that's just how it is, right? So the idea is this, and they've already got fraternities that are recovery based where, everybody in there's in recovery. And so when they go to college, when kids go to college, they can come home from classes and they are confident and they know that their neighbors across the hall are not going to be smoking a joint or snorting some cocaine or drinking a beer right in front of them and making them want to do it, because that's what happens. You see it and you want to do it. You see your friends doing it, and then your disease that tells you don't have a disease is going to tell you, yeah, I could do that one time, right? And there's no defense against that first drink of drug. There's no defense against it unless you've got a spiritual program and unless you've got a support system, right? And unless you really work the program, there's no defense against that, right? So, the thing about it is people are so resistant to call themselves an addict or an alcoholic because of the stigma that society has on it. Because to say you're an addict or to say you're an alcoholic says that you have a moral failing, right? That you have a lack of willpower, that you're not as good as the rest of the people because you can't do what they can do. And nobody wants to admit that, right? When I first got in trouble, I was 16. I got caught smoking pot, and they sent me to rehab. Went to Fairbanks. I had to go to IOP. And they forced me to say I was an addict. And they forced all of us to say that. And we said it, but we were like, okay, rolling our eyes. And then, we were saying it just so they would lay off of us. That's what we did. Then that made me totally anti. So when I got in trouble again when I was 18 and they put me on probation, I had the threat of going to jail over my head as an 18-year-old kid. Long-haired hippie, skinny little dude. I would have got just ate up in jail, right? It would not have been a good thing for me in jail, in Marion County Jail in Indianapolis, right? And back then, that was like, if you could make it in Marion County Jail, you could make it in any prison in the country. It was bad back then. So even though that was the threat over my head, I still smoked pot every day, and I just wouldn't smoke it right before I went to probation. And I would go in there and I put on some fake glasses and I put on a sweater and I go in there reading a book and I try to look like a nerd and I had my meeting sheet signed because I was hoping against all hope that they wouldn't drug test me. And they never did. Because it's a big city, it's Marion County, I was a young kid, they didn't care. It was a pot charge, right? I got lucky. I got real lucky. I mean, later on, when I was facing 7 years suspended after I just did 4 years in prison, I was still getting high. That's a long time. 7 years suspended over my head, and I was still getting high, knowing that if I failed a piss test, they could send me back to prison for 7 years. And I still did it. I still thought it was a good idea. That's nuts. That's insane, right? That's insane. Normal people wouldn't do that. Normal people would not take that chance because that's a ridiculous chance to take, right? But I did because I'm an addict, right? But I still couldn't concede that I was an addict. I couldn't fully concede to my innermost self that I was an addict. And that's what you have to do, right? That's what you really have to do. But the biggest part of it was because society tells me that makes me a failure. And nobody wants to be a failure. That means that I don't have any kind of moral compass. That means I'm a degenerate. That's what that means. That's what it meant in my head, right? So, 20 years, I'm in and out of prisons and jails, always on probation, right? Always in trouble, always getting high, right? Always thinking that I could control, trying to switch up what drugs I was using, trying to use something that, wouldn't show up on a piss test, always trying to get over. And then that turned into criminal-minded thinking because I was always trying to get over because I wanted to do what I wanted to do and I wanted to live my life the way I wanted to live it, right? Well, finally, I had to go to a halfway house. I was forced into it through probation and parole. I got kicked out of one, and they sent me to another one. And I was finally like, you know what? I'm just going to go to all these meetings, and I'm going to get a sponsor, because I finally found out what a sponsor was, right? Somebody to take you through the steps. And I'm gonna get into the literature. I'm gonna read it, and I'm gonna do the step work, right? And I made that decision. And I got a friend that was in the program, and he had 10 years clean at that point, and we used to get high together. So I was like, wow. And he had a business, and he had a wife, and his life was pretty good. He had what I would have liked. So I asked him to be my sponsor, and he did. And we went through the first 3 steps, but I still had reservations. Like, this is why I would get high again, and this is what I would do, right? And I still thought that I could do it. I still thought that I could get high successfully, right? And I could smoke crack like a gentleman or whatever the hell I thought, right? And I thought that, it's just a matter of me getting out of trouble and being okay in life, having, a job that I made decent money and have my own place, and then I'd be okay, right? I always had reasons why I could do it. But that's just not the case, right? I mean, I tried it. I went back out. I did some research, as we call it. And, it didn't take, I smoked some pot and I drank some beers. And I had fun for a little while. It didn't take long before, I smoked a little crack. And then next thing you know, I'm doing heroin, right? And then, man, luckily, I was able to get away from that without going to jail initially. And I kicked. And I didn't go to meetings. I did a location change, geographic change. And I went down to a new city. I went down to Bloomington. I went back to school and started a business. Things were going well, And I went 9 months I was using other drugs. I wasn't using heroin. And the next thing you know, I meet somebody, gets high, and let's get high. I did some heroin. And then it was off to the races. And it wasn't too long before I ended up going back to jail. I'd done 10 out of 12 years in prison, and the last time I went, I decided I was going to change my life, and I had changed it. And I changed it in big ways. But then I fell back into the drugs because I wasn't working a program and I wasn't living a spiritual life and I wasn't surrounding myself with a community of people in recovery that genuinely cared about me without it being transactional, right? It's just they love you just because you're there. They might not like you, but they love you, right? And that's how recovery works, right? So anyway, went back to jail, got back out, decided to go to another halfway house. This time I'm on house arrest. So I kind of did it as a way to make it through house arrest and not be lonely, right? Not be stuck in a house by myself and, end up getting high because I'm lonely. So I went to a halfway house and, I got 8.5 months. Second time. First time I got 8.5 months. Second time I got 8.5 months. And then I got house arrest. And then I was going to Chicago to see my brother. So I had 4 days. So my criminal mind of thinking thought that I could get away with something. So I went and smoked some crack. And it was off to the races. It wasn't a one and done. Because 1 is too many, 1,000 is never enough when you're an addict like me, right? So it took me a long time to get back to the rooms this time. And, that's when I met Molly in my madness. And, I'm thankful, I'm grateful that I met her because she was the love of my life. But we were both insane. We were both in the madness. And, It was rough because the drugs had caused, mental issues with her. And I mean, I was insane too. I mean, we were not in our right minds, but we loved each other. We loved each other so much. And I'm really sad that she's gone. But it took her dying and me losing everything and not even being able to succeed at dying, because I was trying to die after she died and I couldn't do it. And I ended up going to detox, like I said. And, now here I am, and I'm trying to change the world for the better, right? This is my third time trying recovery. And they say when you're done, you're done. Once your threshold for pain has been, exceeded, mine's been exceeded exponentially. I cried for 2 months straight after she died. I mean, it still is very painful. But I know she's in a better place. I know she's happy and she's free now, and she doesn't have the pain anymore, and she doesn't have, the mental problems, and she doesn't have, the family issues, the heartbreak of not having her family and not having her son, right? And not being able to be in her son's life. She doesn't have that anymore. She's a spirit, and she's happy now. And I mean, I think that she's proud of me, and I think that she wants me to do this, right? So I'm doing this for her, all right? So now let me tell you what the idea is, right? Think X-Men, 10X, right? School for especially gifted students. It's like a private school. It's not some, little place for degenerates, right? I mean, think about this, okay? I did some research. There's 1.5 million students when you add up, the people that get GEDs and the people that get they graduate from high school. And this was in 2019, where the statistics I got were online just the other day. 1.5 million students in Indiana alone, right? So if 13% of those are destined to become alcoholics and addicts, that's 190,000 students in Indiana alone, right? That's a lot. So when I went to high school, there was 1,000 people in my high school, right? And it was a good school. And I'm pretty sure that, Cathedral, which is a Catholic school, is a private school, and like Bishop Chatard, I mean, those are small schools, right? I drove by them. They're not that much bigger than Zionsville was when I grew up. And that's part of the draw of private schools, is that you've got less students per teacher, right? You got maybe 30 students per teacher per class, and that's manageable for a teacher, so they can be in the lives of their students and they can really pay attention and see what's going on and be aware, right? Well, what I want to do is I want to make it recovery based, right? I want there to be a big book study, right? Learn the literature, learn what it means to be an addict and alcoholic, right? And also learn what it is to do the 12 steps, and learn what it means, right? To live this spiritual, selfless life and to care about people genuinely, right? And then that's a safe space for these kids. But then it's also going to be, a dream building place. Think and Grow Rich. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Those will be classes, right? These are going to be first year classes. You have to take those classes. You have to learn how to set goals and how to, build a dream, how to conceive a dream, right? And then how to develop it and how to nurture it and how to build it and execute it. And that's part of what the teachers are going to be doing in the lives of these kids, right? There'll be a regular curriculum, right? But it'll be the curriculum of like King's, private schools, right? It's not going to be, regurgitated stuff and like memorization and like who can hit the button the fastest and give you the answer and become a good citizen. We're going to teach critical thinking, right? Like they did when I was in school. So you can really look at the evidence objectively and make a decision based on what you think, based on what the evidence tells you. And there's not necessarily right or wrong answers. There's opinions on what you think when presented with the evidence, right? And you could be right, you could be wrong, but you have the opportunity to think it through, and the teachers can see how you're thinking it through. And it's not just A, B, C, or D, right? It's long answer. You have to think, right? We're trying to create smart kids, right? That can live a life and learn how to learn, right? This is almost like it's like being in college and high school kind of thing, right? Where you really learn how to learn, right? So that way they'll be prepared to go to college. And then when they get to college, I want a Greek organization there, a co-ed fraternity, which is a service fraternity. That's the only way you can have a co-ed fraternity. And that way they're doing community service because they're giving back, Like they're giving service, but they're also doing fundraising stuff so that we can build more schools. Because if there's only 1,000 kids in a school, that means we need 190 schools in Indiana alone, right? Every community needs one, right? I mean, it's a small school. We can fit it in a small space, right? And I mean, we may even be able to share the resources with the bigger schools around them. But if not, who cares? We have 1,000 students. We can have a football team. We can have a wrestling team. We can have a basketball team. We can have a volleyball team, a baseball team. We can have all that stuff, right? And because Molly was a championship swimmer, I definitely want a swimming pool and everyone. And because she was who she was in the arts, definitely want theater, right? Got to have a music program. Anything that any other school has, we're going to have, right? This is going to be prepping people. It's college prep, right? This is going to be a private school. But money should not be a consideration. So if you're a kid whose family doesn't have money, there'll be scholarships available. Because I'm going to try to make this a big thing. I'm trying to get funding from a lot of different places. Now, I'm not trying yet. I'm going to put my own money into it first because I'm going to show my dedication, right? This is a labor of love. This is going to take a long time, I think, unless I just happen on Jim Irsay gives me $10 billion or something like that, right? He's in recovery, right? And so that may be an end. We'll see, right? But, I mean, I am in Indiana, and I do, know people who know him, like 3 degrees of separation or whatever. So we'll see. We'll see if I can get the introduction. We'll see if he's interested, right? But anyway, that is the point. Now, there's one more phase of development of this. This is communities, like housing additions, entire recovery communities, right? Now, we have to maintain ownership of these houses at 51%, but the people can build equity, 49%. That way, if somebody decides that they want to go out and try to live a normal life and use drugs and alcohol like a gentleman, and maybe they think that they're not an addict or an alcoholic, that's fine. Go ahead and go, but you can't stay here. You can't stay here because this is a safe place, right? We need to have this as a drug-free, alcohol-free zone, right? And I mean, really, it's ridiculous that one of the most dangerous drugs out there, aside from fentanyl, is alcohol. I mean, it kills so many people. It is ridiculous that they sell it on every corner. And you know why they do it? Because Al Capone gangstered the government into allowing it, right? And the people wanted to get drunk, right? And I mean, really, when you think about it, 7 out of 8 people can do it okay. So it's just that the 1 out of 8 of us can't, and we die because of it. And we die 29 years early. That's the average age of 48. So that's average. I mean, some are dying at 25, some are dying at 60, right? But the average is 29 years too soon. 12%. 12 out of the 13% are dying. That means only 1 out of 100 of people in general, that those are the addicts that make it. 12 out of 100 of people in general just die. And we shut the world down over less than 1% mortality rate for disease. But when we look at a disease of addiction that kills 12%, we act like it's a moral failing and nobody does anything. Nobody even talks about it. Come on, right? Or when we do help people, we shoo them off like they're a problem, right? Man, we are the actors. We're the leaders. We're the painters, the artists, the musicians, the entrepreneurs, the architects. We're the builders of the world, right? The entertainers. We are the people that make the world beautiful. The poets, the writers. I mean, we are everybody. We are you. We are you. We just don't give ourselves a chance. And we don't know how to give ourselves a chance because society has not given us an avenue to give ourselves a chance. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a vehicle that we can ride in and we can live in safely so that we can realize our full potential in life. And excuse me. That's what I'm trying to do. That is what I'm trying to do for the world. And I think that this is going to be probably a lifelong pursuit. And I don't really care if I make any money off of it. I mean, it's going to cost so much money to build these schools. If I take some money, it would be a selfish thing, right? So, if I do a lot of work for it, sure, I'll probably pay myself a little bit because, you got to be paid for your time so that I can live. But that's not my goal, right? I don't care about the money. I care about the people. And who can I help? How can I help? How many can I help? And in what spirit can I help them, right? And I want to help them in a spirit of selflessness, a spirit of giving, because I feel like maybe I owe a karmic debt, right? Maybe this is my way of paying it back. But that's the Molly Mo Foundation. I want Molly's name to be a beacon of hope for other people in her exact situation.